Well, hello and welcome back to another one of my monthly reviews, my monthly critiques. This is where I look back at a selection of my own images from a couple of months ago. This will be from July 2020, highlighting mostly some of the bits and pieces that perhaps I got wrong or I could have done better, either in the field or in post-processing. I find just looking back like this really does help me in my own personal development. And it also allows me to maybe avoid making some of those mistakes in the future. So I think we've got 8 or 9 images to go through, so let's jump straight over to the screen and take a look at our first image. Okay, so this is an image made along the Causeway Coast at a place called Dunseverick. Really beautiful evening, but I had a couple of really lovely days. And I'll put a link up the top to the vlog from this particular outing. It was a really lovely evening, apart from one thing, where I ended up positioning myself later that evening. Even though I had gotten there first, some other photographers had arrived down to shoot the waterfall, and one in particular was hurling a little bit of abuse my way because I wouldn't get out of his image. Now, I always try to avoid getting in the way of other photographers and even people who are just out enjoying the landscape. But I held my ground because I was kind of there first. But anyway, that's a side point. So this particular image, I still quite like it, but I think it does have a few flaws. Well, let's first of all talk about what I sort of was looking to go for when I was in the field, or at least what I was aware of when I was in the field. So there's a couple of things. Firstly, I really was paying attention to the relationship between the rock and the reeds and how the water. I definitely wanted, there was a little bit of a breeze, and you can see that we're up here at 1 second, so there's a little bit of a breeze causing a little bit of movement in the in those reeds. But I was really making sure that the images that I came away with had a little bit of space around this rock. And so that was one of the first things that I was really paying close attention to. I really love the colour of the sort of low sun glinting off the little sort of mini rapids here. Unfortunately, because of the dip in the sort of river here, a lot of this kind of goes into more sort of cooler tones. Speaking of the cooler tones and the shadows, I think I mentioned this in the vlog itself. There was a huge, because of behind me here on the left hand side, there's a big sort of cliff face. And so the sun was kind of dipping in and out from behind, or dipping in behind it, which meant that we were losing some of the light here, which isn't ideal. I think I spoke about this in the video, where when you're in the field, your eye can sometimes fool you into thinking that it's evenly lit across the scene, and when you get home, you sort of realize this big shadow and you might end up sort of unnaturally lighting it. In the field, I was well aware of this, and I knew that I had to potentially compensate for it. But the main thing that I was interested in was just how I was making sure that the reeds weren't overlapping the rock. I also wanted a little bit of gap and separation between the coves here, which I've just about achieved, as you can see there. There were some nice clouds in the sky. They hadn't quite started taking on some of the evening light. Overall, a pleasing enough image. In post, I think I've gone a little bit too warm with the white balance, and so looking just at a duplicate one, this is one that I've sort of worked on just a little bit differently, just sort of cooling those down a little bit. Now I think if I was working, you see that just the difference there between those. I like the white balance now that I've sort of reworked it on the bottom side of the frame, but I think maybe it's a little bit too cool in the upper side. So it might be a case of maybe dragging down a grad and maybe just warming up just a slight touch on that upper section as well. I want to keep some of those warm tones, but slightly back off. You can see this was the original, slightly back off some of those tones. Looking at it again now as well, I would probably darken this little section just a little bit more. I think in the original image, if I look back, yeah, for me that's just a little bit too bright. Don't like things too bright close to the edge of the frame. And again, an okay image, very pleasing evening out. It's certainly one that I will, and again I mentioned this in last month's video, one of the things I find really beneficial of looking back at images several months ago, is it allows me just to refine the processing, and I think this one here could certainly do with a little bit more of that refining. Okay, so these next two images I'll kind of pair together. They were just taken out on during July. July and August, we were actually fostering a little Yorkshire Terrier, and so obviously we spent a lot of time out just doing a little bit of dog walking. And these next two images were actually made on the Fuji X-T4 just while we were out walking the little pup. This image here, nothing really to look at in its current state. What I find, one of the things I love about photography is the exploration. And I'm quite often just making images with my iPhone, as a lot of us do. But in this case, I was kind of working a couple of potential compositions for future along this little stretch of coastline. And this particular image here, as I say, nothing much to look at in its current state. But I really loved the sort of curve. Well, first of all, I loved the mood of the day. Probably if I had had a little bit more time, I probably would have spent some more time over this here. But I really love just some of those shapes. Now, I think what would benefit this is a much longer exposure. Obviously this was just handheld, a bit of a recce shot. Ideally the beach would be cleaner. I'm not sure if that's going to be possible, whether a high outgoing tide kind of sweeps the beach. You can see here that it's a little bit sort of footprinty and shelly and seaweedy. But I think with a very moody sky with sort of reasonably fast moving clouds, I think something like a 10 stop, or depending on the lighting conditions, even the 16 stop, and have something of up to a minute or more exposure time. I just get the feeling that this could actually make for quite a nice image. So it's certainly one that I will want to head back to at some point. And then similarly, this made just along the way, and again I think this has potential as well. The clouds that day as we were walking were fantastic. We did get soaked, and this is actually one of the things that I've come to realize since living on the north coast of Ireland. I didn't realize we actually had a storm season here, and during the summer we do get some fantastic build-up of some big old clouds. And typically we're thinking, oh yeah, summertime photography, really early mornings, really late nights, whatever. But actually during the day you can get some phenomenal conditions in the sky, and this was one of those days. And I'm kind of sorry that I didn't have a lot more time to spend here. But again, this is just that whole recon side of things that I spend a lot of my time doing. And I really think that this sort of image, or at least this composition, has legs. Now it certainly would need clouds, or my new favorite word, cloudage, as we have going on here. I think maybe a 4-stop ND filter to give you maybe a half a second or so exposure. This beach has got some fantastic shells on it, and just they would create some wonderful lines being pulled out. What you would also want is you would want some light. Now the sun at this point was behind me, it was dipping in and out of behind clouds. You definitely would want a little bit of direct sunlight on that rock. You can see that there is actually a little bit of direct sunlight on it here. It's actually just sort of lifting the shadows just a touch. And then I think in the background, this is Rathlin Island in the background. I don't think that adds anything to the story here, and in fact it's kind of the little clump of rock is actually sort of intersecting Rathlin. So in an ideal world, I'm not sure how possible this would be, we would maybe have some low cloud or low something mist maybe, or something sort of obscuring at least partly Rathlin Island. But I just think that this image has got some legs from a composition point of view, and it's certainly one that I will go back to at some point when I feel the conditions are going to be right. Okay, so onto an image made down at Ballintoy, and I love this little section of beach. And It's the colours, and in fact, if I go back to a couple of years beforehand, this was captured at pretty much the same location, and I just love how the gold, how the early morning light lights up the rock, making it look almost like it's gold. There were a few things that drew me to this image, and it's mostly about colour. And it was the greens and the golds, the little sort of nod to the beach, those sort of warm sort of beach colours, and of course the jet black rock, that the lovely sort of rich black rock. I loved in this. Now I took a number of images of this scene of the waves. The waves kind of come in and wash back out over the top of it, and I loved how just this particular rock was just kind of poking through from that wave, and you can just about see some of those gold flecks, and then of course you've got just this little wisp of the receding tide coming back out again. Now again, as with everything, there's probably a few things that I could have done better in the field, and maybe in post as well. If I bring up the original image, so this is the original image, first thing you'll notice is that there is a little bit of clipping in the waves. Now this was kind of unavoidable because, and I think I said this in the video, these rocks do take on a really huge sort of deep black color, and trying to get the balance there between not blowing out your highlights versus having to pull out too many shadows. Thankfully, with not too many of the highlights being blown out, obviously I was able to recover most of the details in there. I think the other thing that I probably could pull back just a little bit on, it wasn't a huge amount of processing done on this. You see that I've pulled back those highlights, just a little touch on the shadows, pulled back the blacks a little bit, but it's actually to do with the contrast curve. Now I haven't decided yet on the kind of best way to handle this here, but I think maybe the contrast is maybe just a little bit too rich. If I go back to a medium contrast, I think it's maybe just a little bit too washed out. So I probably would have to play about manually with the contrast curve there, with the tone curve, just to get a contrast that I actually like. There may even be as well, this is obviously just the full frame, there might even be a couple of images, I just go lights out, and a couple of separate images in there as well. But I really like this image, and again it's one of those locations that it's just up the road from me, and I could have hours of fun here, and even at this time of year where that sunrise is starting to kind of move away from direct light, if you've actually got a little bit of reflective light from sort of low clouds in the morning, you'll still get some lovely rich colors in this little cove. But an image that actually I liked it in the field, and I quite like it now. Just needs a couple of different tweaks, I think. Okay, so on to this image, and this remains probably my favorite image from the month of July. Loved it in the field, really love it now as well, and prints really well as well. The light was disappearing pretty quickly, and I would have loved to have discovered this scene maybe 20 minutes beforehand, when the full scene was completely illuminated. Now, having said that, I do love the transition of cool to warm, but there's a couple of things that I think could have been done better there. One, I would have loved this sort of the warm transition to stretch from the bottom left up to the top right. This little gap down here kind of was troubling me in the field, continues to trouble me here now. I would have loved this to have filled in a little bit more with the warm colours. Regarding the cool tones, I couldn't quite, I did a little bit of post-processing on those cool tones, and I couldn't quite get it to the level of the cool tones that I really wanted. I got it close enough, but I think there's maybe, with fresh eyes, maybe in a few weeks' time, I'll come back to this again and maybe do another little edit. I love the textures. It's a focus stacked image, and I just absolutely love the textures, both in the bit of kelp and the seaweed, the rock, and then these little sort of sea ferns as well. It really makes me wish that I could have a play with a medium format camera. I would love to see the detail that a medium format sensor can bring out to a scene such as this. But this is, I'm also really happy that that kelp, this wasn't placed by me. I'm not someone who would place things in a scene. We are now approaching that time of year where we will see a lot of unnaturally placed leaves, autumn leaves, filling kind of 10mm viewpoints. But this is exactly how I found it, this twist. But within a few minutes, the sun had dipped behind the rocks behind me, and the light was gone. But yeah, remains probably my favorite image from July. Okay, so onto this image, and honestly, I'm not quite sure what's going on here, but I like it. So basically up on the Giant's Causeway, and I'm pretty sure what has happened here, I've got a 4-stop ND on, and so it's giving me a, I don't know what it was, maybe 0.6 of a second. And I think what I've done is I've kicked my tripod, or I've moved my tripod, or I've done something, because you can see that there's a bit of a sort of a twist going on here. But it was a beautiful night, and there was a lot of kind of crepuscular rays coming down, a lot of gaps in the clouds, and they were sort of reflecting off the sea. And I got a couple of images from that night that I quite like, but I also like this one, but I feel like a bit of a fraud because I didn't really take it. There's one thing that kind of does detract a little bit from it. There was a little boat out here, and you can kind of see the outline of the boat here, but I just love the shapes that's been pulling. But yeah, hands up, I'm not quite sure I remember taking this, but I like it anyway. So on to the penultimate image from this little sort of mini review, and this is one taken from a little break across the border from July over into Inishowen and up at Malin Head. The beaches in and around, obviously everyone will go up to Malin Head specifically to go walk out to the end where the Star Wars scenes and everything were facing. Don't get me wrong, it's a beautiful area out there, but the beaches around Malin Head are incredible, full of just stones and boulders and pebbles such as this, no more so than on this particular little beach here. Now again, I was very rushed. I'll put the link up to the vlog up here, because I no sooner kind of started to set up that I saw that the weather was going to pretty much, go to pot. Really heavy rain was moving through, and it moved through for a good couple of hours. I think, unlike the previous image, or the previous image looking down on the kelp, which I liked in the field and I still like, I liked this one in the field, but now I'm not too sure. I'm just not sure it works. Not least, it's very flat light. Now, I wouldn't have wanted direct sunlight, obviously, on it, but it would have been nice just to have a little bit of maybe a bit of a warmth in there, or some reflective light, just to bring a little bit of life. I think it's a little bit lifeless. I do like the curve of the kelp through the sort of stones, and of course using a polarizer has allowed me to kind of cut through any reflection there and see right the way down. It's another focus stacked image, and you can see again that you're getting some really wonderful detail out of that focus stacked image. But I just don't think I'm not too keen on the green kelp up here. I could probably do something like reduce the greens a little bit there from that. I'm not sure, but yeah, it's unfortunate because I think it's mostly let down by the very flat light. I also think that the bottom half of the image, so this probably works better than the top half of the image. Now I don't think it works as an image, but it certainly works better than that top half as well. So I think if I was going back and looking at this particular scene again, or a scene like this, I would probably look more for something that wasn't including this top half of it within the scene. But it's interesting how those two images, one I liked it, both I really liked in the field, but now one I've kind of lost a little bit of appeal for. So there you go, that is my little mini review of some of the images made in July 2020. As I say, this exercise is really, if you guys get anything out of it then bonus, but it's really just more for me. and I'm really finding it useful, giving myself some distance, normally a couple of months, and then going back through the images and picking out, mostly trying to pick out, what I could improve in the image, be that in the field. Preferably, if it's from a composition point of view, I will have made note of that in the field. But there's been a few occasions, even in these images in July, where I think my composition was let down, and I didn't realize it in the field. And certainly from a post-processing point of view as well. I don't spend a lot of time post-processing images, and I probably could do with sharpening up some of my post-processing skills. Right, well, on that note, I'm going to go and make myself another cuppa. I hope you've enjoyed this little self-critique session, and what will we be doing? So I'll be back on Sunday. Yeah, just very quickly, I'm hoping to kind of publish, you might have already started to see this happening, I'm hoping to publish a couple of extra images or a couple of extra vlogs each week. So every other Tuesday there'll be a Talk Tuesdays type of session, and that's just us having a bit of a chinwag such as this. And then every other Friday we'll hopefully have a 5-minute Fridays from the field. You'll have seen the last one just Friday past. And then on every Sunday we should have a slightly longer vlog from the field as well. The schedule should go Talk Tuesdays, long form on a Sunday, 5-minute Friday, long form on a Sunday. So 2 Talk Tuesdays a month, 2 5-minute Fridays a month, and 4/5 long form Sundays. Whew. Speaking of which, I best go back to finishing off this edit, which you'll see on Sunday, and it's where I go chasing a cloud inversion. Until next time, take care. Bye bye.